So I would like for you to tell everyone here at the cafe about your book, The Tao of Rejuvenation.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. As you know, we're living in an age of crisis. It's global warming, healthcare meltdown. These are difficult times. With the Tao of Rejuvenation, what I did was I wrote a prescription for the times. That's fundamentally what I did with the Tao of Rejuvenation. And in order to write the prescription for the times, I turned not only to present time information about rejuvenation, but I've also turned to the past, to our ancestors. Some people may not know that we are all actually the inheritors of a great tradition that specializes in bodily rejuvenation. Several months ago, 60 Minutes did a show on what they were calling the longevity gene. The longevity gene is essentially the body's regenerative chemistry. And the 60 Minutes piece was about the fact that modern scientists today actually feel that they're on the brink of unlocking this longevity gene. And there's a substance that they're very interested in right now, and they feel that this substance is the secret elixir that will actually allow the body to secrete this longevity gene. The substance, some people will know, is called resveratrol, and it's being sold today. And in the piece on 60 Minutes, you could actually see these scientists standing in front of their high-tech equipment, and they were very, very excited about the fact that they felt like they were close to unlocking the so-called longevity gene in the human body. If you see the piece on 60 Minutes, you might be inclined to think that this is all very modern and very scientific. But the fact is that our ancestors knew about these things many, many, many years ago. Our ancestors knew about this longevity gene. They called it soma. They called it the body's regenerative chemistry. So it's actually nothing particularly new. It's actually something quite old. And in writing the Tao of Rejuvenation, I turned to the ancient traditions on bodily rejuvenation. You can go back to ancient Taoists. Ancient Taoists had people who completely specialized in bodily rejuvenation. They specialized in keeping people alive for long stretches of time. You can go back to the yogis who practiced in the area which is now Kashmir in India. They had people who specialized in life extension, rejuvenation. Even the early Christians had people who specialized in rejuvenation. Some people will be familiar with the Essene Gospel of Peace. The original manuscript for the Essene Gospel of Peace is now in the Vatican Library in Rome under lock and key. Some people think the Essene Gospel of Peace is actually Jesus himself instructing his disciples on rejuvenation. We also have these wonderful traditional medical systems that come out of the East, the traditional medical systems of India, of Tibet and China. Within these medical cultures, there were people who specialized in life extension, in longevity. And so I turned to our ancestors. I turned to those traditions in creating the Tao of Rejuvenation, in writing this prescription for the modern times, and I took the most pertinent information and lay it out for the modern reader in a clear and concise way so that people can actually understand the principles that the ancient used to extend life, understand those principles, and also begin to incorporate them in their own life. So the Tao of Rejuvenation is my prescription for this modern time. Vice President Gore, some people know that Al Gore likes to say the planet has a fever. We're in a kind of fire imbalance time. We're looking at global warming. These kinds of conditions require a balancing approach. This is how Oriental medicine is actually practiced, as we embrace the phase we tend to avoid. So the Tao of Rejuvenation is that prescription, and it includes all aspects of life practice that actually allows this regenerative chemistry to awaken. I also include in there some of the modern teachings of the great healing master, Adidasam Raj. Adidasam Raj was a master who was deeply interested in this matter of life extension. And it was Adidasam Raj who laid out this beautifully concise approach to how to unlock the body's regenerative chemistry. In the 70s, Adidasam Raj did a very concentrated study of this whole matter of bodily rejuvenation. If we look at the earliest written documents that we know about, which are the Vedas, go back to the Rig Veda, the earliest book in those documents, the authors of the Vedas are talking about a magical substance that they call soma. And this soma heals disease, it promotes long life. It even, if you look at those poems of praise to soma, it's even producing happiness and ecstasy. This is the descriptions of soma. Over the years of history, there have been all kinds of adventurers and scholars who have gone off in search of the soma, trying to determine, well, what was this substance that the ancients were using to produce these profound effects of rejuvenation? It was in the 70s that the great healing master Adidasam Raj said, the soma actually does exist. Some people think, well, it's just a myth. I thought it was a myth for a good part of my life. It was Adidasam Raj that said, no, the soma actually does exist, except it's not actually out in nature. The soma is something the body will produce when all of the functions of the body are properly cultivated and raised to their highest degree of functioning. Then the endocrine system will produce this soma. That, in a nutshell, is what inspired me to write the Tao of Rejuvenation, is lay out all the principles of how did the ancient practitioners, and how do some modern practitioners, because the book includes modern lessons that we've learned, how do they unlock this regenerative chemistry in the human body? How can we get the human body secreting this soma? That's what this book is about, and the principles are there for anyone to pick up and read.
Wow, Angelo, I haven't heard you speak about your book before. I've read your book, but hearing you speak about it, this is exciting. I myself, I've heard of the word soma, and where's the soma? Where can I get it? And what you're saying is the soma is actually already a part of my body, and if I can rejuvenate my body to the point that it's working properly, then the soma is then activated?
Exactly. I mean, I started writing this book shortly after I began to practice Oriental medicine. I had a small clinic in Melbourne, Australia. And a woman came to me who had had a chronic disease, a long-term chronic disease. And she tried everything to reverse the disease and rejuvenate herself. It had not worked. And so she'd come to see me. That's how it is when you practice alternative medicine. People usually try all of the obvious things first, and then they come to see an alternative medical practitioner. And she was lying on my treatment table, and I was there. I was new to this practice, and I was writing a prescription. And then almost as an afterthought, I decided to put my hands on her body and do a form of laying on of hands or touch massage or whatever you want to call it. And I just put my hands on her body and I just tried to open up to the universe and invoke and draw on the great healing power in the universe, in light itself. And put it into her. And while I was doing this, there was suddenly a shudder in her body, and she shook on the table. She coughed a few times. This was a long-term chronic lung condition. And then her color changed. Her energy levels shifted, and she got up off the table, and she was better. She called me an hour later and said, I don't know what you did, but I'm healed. It's gone. My energy is getting better and better every moment.
Wow. Now,
what impressed me about that moment was she was at a dark moment in her life. Her health was way down. But even then, when the body is apparently sick and ill, even then, this regenerative chemistry in the body, the potential is there. And the potential is there to be awakened. Whatever occurred in my office on that day awakened this regenerative chemistry, and her body was rejuvenated in a matter of minutes and hours. That moment made me a student of rejuvenation. That moment was the moment in which I became deeply interested in the subject. And when you begin to study rejuvenation, you find out that these kinds of spontaneous healings and dramatic healings, they're actually quite common, or more common than we might expect. We all know that you can have a flu in one moment and then suddenly you can get better. And we tend to take that regenerative chemistry for granted. But ancient practitioners very clearly and strategically and methodically went about observing the processes that open up and awaken this regenerative chemistry. So it was that moment that really began the study of rejuvenation for me. I have seen these kinds of dramatic awakenings of the body's regenerative chemistry now many times since that time. And I also include some of the more interesting and dramatic examples of rejuvenation in the book that are there really to inspire us and let us know that the body's rejuvenative chemistry is quite profound. And if we learn to do the right things, we can start unlocking that regenerative chemistry now to preserve health and well-being. You can turn to these ancient traditions. They all have their examples of great life extension. I mean, they have examples of people that lived very long lives. They all have their examples of dramatic healings. And this was at a time where we didn't have this high-tech medical safety net. I mean, in those days, you either got it right or you were dead at 40, which was the average age that a Chinese peasant passed away. The average lifestyle for a Chinese peasant was about 40 years of age. So this regenerative chemistry is very profound. The soma can be awakened in all kinds of ways. And the book lays out what are the principles, what are the practices that will actually allow this regenerative chemistry to awaken and become quite powerful.
I'm a longtime fan of being healthy and eating healthy, and here at the Blue OK, we try to serve very healthy food. The idea that I could actually cause this soma in my own body to begin to rejuvenate and regenerate my life, this is very good information, and I'm sure everyone who's listening today feels the same way. Angelo, is there something that's in this book that we can just give people a little bit of taste of something they could apply before they even get the book? They want to go, we're going to tell them later where they can find your book, but is there something, just practical advice you could say to the audience that might help them begin this process of rejuvenation?
Let me lay it out as simply as we can in this circumstance here today. It was Adidas Samraj who summarized the process of bodily rejuvenation as a process of purification, rebalancing, and rejuvenation. When we talk about purification, we are talking about a process that involves the blood in the body. And so when a person learns how to rightly cultivate the blood, they can add years of health to their lives. When a person learns how to rightly cultivate the autonomic nervous system, which is what rebalancing pertains to, the autonomic nervous system. When you learn how to cultivate the autonomic nervous system properly, you can add years of health to your life. Rejuvenation pertains to the endocrine system. So when you learn how to properly cultivate the endocrine system, you can add years of health to your life. Let's talk about the blood a little bit, because the blood is that circumstance that is directly impacted by diet. So diet, absolutely, this is a food body. Food is going to have a dramatic effect on the health of the human body. I lay out in the Tao of Rejuvenation book the two principles of right cultivation of the blood. The first principle for the right cultivation of the blood is blood purity. Keep the blood pure. And this is directly impacted by what we eat. If you eat toxic food, then toxins deposit in the blood. If you eat pure food, then you minimize the amount of toxins that coagulate and concentrate in the blood. So good food will produce blood purity. And within the circumstance of good food, I point to organic raw greens as the basic food for the regenerative diet. No regenerative diet can be truly effective unless there is a high concentration of organic raw greens. And nowadays we know about people who are taking in large quantities of raw greens in the forms of these green smoothies. Victoria Butenko has written books about this and is educating people about the virtue of raw greens and taking them in the form of a smoothie. What is so good about those raw greens? They cleanse the blood. They cleanse toxins out of the blood. They cleanse the inflammatory substances that our own immune system, our own body's own inflammatory system will secrete inflammatory substances into the blood. These raw organic greens are natural blood cleansers. There is nothing that promotes organ degeneration more quickly than inflammation. We now know that heart disease, what ultimately destroys the human heart, is the body's own inflammation system. So you want to cleanse these inflammatory substances out of the blood on a regular basis. So blood purity can be achieved through right diet. And it doesn't just have to be raw green smoothies. Our ancestors used herbs. Before the time of antibiotics, our ancestors used the right combination of powerful herbs to clear the blood of inflammation, infection, and toxicity. And I give some blood cleansing herbal formulas in the book. There are recipes there. So this is the most basic approach to unlocking the body's regenerative chemistry, is blood purity. Keep the blood pure. Right diet. It's very simple. It requires some discipline. No one is going to truly live a long and healthy life if they're using an abundance of junk food and depositing all of these toxins in the blood. Then the blood thickens, it doesn't flow properly, and the possibility of strokes and embolism and obstructive cardiovascular disease increases. So this is the first principle of right cultivation of the blood purity. The second principle of right cultivation of the blood is ensuring that the body produces an abundant quantity of blood. And I talk about this in the Tao of Rejuvenation. You want your body to produce abundant blood so that that blood can fill out the circulatory pathways. The blood is rich and pure and it's going to nourish all those cells, but it's keeping a strong blood flow in the body, probably our best defense against cardiovascular disease. And cardiovascular degeneration is ensure that the blood supply is abundant. And the wisdom in this area really comes from Oriental medicine. comes from Chinese medicine specifically. The founders and the creators of Chinese medicine discovered hundreds of years ago herbs that were beautiful blood precursors. In other words, when the body took these essential oils in that the herbs contained, the body would just turn those oils into blood. It allows the body to produce an abundant blood supply. So I turn to Oriental medicine for that. I lay out some of the recipes and formulas that I give. Some of these recipes are known mostly to practitioners of Oriental medicine. They're not so commonly known. I've put them in the book, laid out the recipes, and fundamentally, if people do nothing else except periodically use the right foods to purify the blood and the right herbs to purify the blood, and they use herbs that allows the body to produce an abundant supply of blood, you are taking a giant step towards unlocking the body's regenerative chemistry. That's stage one, as Adidasan Raj described it. Purification of the blood, cultivation of the blood. It's absolutely critical. Anybody can do these things. If you just started to increase your consumption of these raw greens, you're beginning the process of purifying blood. You're promoting health and well-being. So that's just one aspect, and I've laid that out in the section relative to the blood. I also point out that the blood has always been associated with longevity. The myth of Count Dracula, I mean, the Count has living from century to century. Well, how is the Count doing it? Well, he's subsisting on a very strange diet of blood and sex, actually. Sexuality can also be a regenerative practice, and I talk about that in the book too. So the blood, the right cultivation of the blood, anybody can do it. It's very basic. You just need to know and acquire the right ingredients, and you can begin that process. You want to move on to the matter of the right cultivation of the nervous system in this matter of rebalancing the nervous system. I turn to the yogis of northern India for this information. Nowadays, we have just discovered scientifically that every heart in every species comes with a particular pre-programmed set of beats. In other words, the human heart will get several billion beats, and when those beats are used up, then the heart will shut down. This is something we discovered scientifically in the last few years. Ancient yogis knew about this 1,000 years ago. They understood that if we could slow the heart rate, then we're going to get more time for those pre-programmed amount of heartbeats. So yogis developed all kinds of practices, breathing exercises. And I know as a kid, I always remember hearing about the yogis being buried and then they were unearthed and they were entombed, and then they came out weeks later and they were completely fine. This points to the fact that the yogis learned how to slow the heart rate. Through the rebalancing of the autonomic nervous system, they could slow their heart rate and extend their life. So I talk about all of those practices and lay them out in a way that people can actually start to apply without becoming a yogi who's about to be entombed. That's not the point. Relative to the third part, rejuvenation, the endocrine system, I also turn to the Oriental medical systems for information there, because our ancestors in those systems really discovered what I see as the perfect endocrine fuels. They found the herbs and the substances in nature that when you take them into the body, they feed the endocrine system. And the endocrine system, of course, is producing all of the growth hormones that are so necessary for life. And I include recipes in the book too, in this whole area of rejuvenation and how to properly feed the endocrine system. So I lay it all out. People can do a little bit of this, They can do a lot of it. The ones who get the greatest results are the ones who will learn to cultivate the body in each one of those phases. And then people can get tremendous results and prevent a great deal of disease and distress that's totally unnecessary if we just learn the information which has already been given to us by our ancestors. It's all there.
Well, this is very exciting. Thank you, Angelo. I want people to get this book. I want them to read about it so they can begin to enjoy health, longevity, and essential well-being. Your book's available on Amazon.com?
The book is on Amazon.com. The book is in bookstores and readily available.
Well, our listeners can click on the link here on the website for Amazon.com, and that'll take you to Angelo's book immediately, and you can purchase it right after we leave here today. Angelo, I was thinking while you were talking, we have a kitchen here in the Blue OK, and I was thinking it might be a good idea if you and I went in the kitchen and had a green drink. What do you think about that?
You never have to ask me twice.
Excellent. Well, before we go, I wanted to say again that Angelo has a website. It's called www.tbmedicine.com. That stands for Traditional Botanical Medicine.
Exactly.
And you can go there and read more about Angelo's book, find out a little bit more about his clinic in Cobb Mountain, and hopefully you'll be clicking on the link for Amazon.com and buying a book as soon as we go. But I think we should head into the kitchen and see if we can't find Amy and have ourselves a green drink.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for being here today. Angelo, thank you for being here today, and we'll talk to everyone again at the Blue OK.